Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Today, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York executed a series of search warrants and seized the privileged communications between my client, Michael Cohen, and his clients. I have been advised by federal prosecutors that the New York action is in part a referral by the Office of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. I have Laura Coates on the phone, former federal prosecutor. Laura, your reaction to this, I'm no lawyer, but it seems rather unusual for an attorney's office to be raided by the FBI.
It is normally very unusual for that to happen because you have the attorney-client privilege. Normally you'd have to circumvent to get any information that's worthwhile. But you have to understand this is yet again another instance of the special counsel's office who, by surprise attack, likely in an effort to ensure that nothing that may be fleeting will be disposed of, any hard evidence or anything that would not fall under either attorney-client privilege or otherwise would be preserved in an effort to get it. We saw the same thing happen almost a year ago now when you had the no-knock and announce warrant executed on Paul Manafort, somebody else who's been very close to the President of the United States in a different capacity, as a way of trying to get information. Normally we have these protocols and etiquette and rules of etiquette that suggest we can kind of negotiate the terms of having somebody's information handed over to discovery. But if the special counsel's office or another prosecutorial division understands or believes that the information they are seeking is going to be destroyed or not going to be given voluntarily, they have every right to do so in this fashion.
I want to read from the New York Times story. Again, if you're just tuning in, the New York Times, Matt Apuzzo reporting that Michael Cohen, President Trump's attorney, his offices have been raided. Documents have been taken, including documents that Michael Cohen's attorney says are privileged communication. Obviously, the FBI and the special counsel, Robert Mueller, will dispute that. Mr. Ryan said Mr. Cohen, this is from the New York Times story, has cooperated with authorities and turned over thousands of documents to congressional investigators looking into Russian election meddling. The payments to Miss Clifford, that's Stormy Daniels, are only one of many topics being investigated, according to a person briefed on the search. The FBI also seized emails, tax documents, and business records, the person said. Laura Coates, that seems rather significant. The tax documents are also being seized.
Extremely significant, because remember, we've always had these questions about what the President of the United States tax documents would actually reveal or allude to. And now you have somebody who, just a few days after the President of the United States has confirmed in that off-the-cuff interview in the back of Air Force One that he was unaware of the nature of or the origin of a payment made by his attorney, you now see special counsel's office going back to try to confirm or find out information about perhaps other payments not related to Stormy Daniels or unrelated things we may know about. But what you see here is a pattern by the special counsel of asking and then failing to trust, which is exactly what every prosecutor would do who has discovery in front of them or behind them, would say, I'd like you to give me everything you have, and then except they didn't get everything over. For example, in the Trump organization, they had the same thing happen a few weeks ago when they said, I'd like everything, and they had been cooperating over time. And then it turned out they had a subpoena and wanted to have more information. So the skepticism is there, but it's very significant, Jake, to think that somebody who normally would have the protections of the attorney-client privilege, a few days after having to be confirmed that he has gone rogue in other respects, would have the special counsel's office knocking at their door to ensure they actually do have full compliance. We're not in the game of voluntary cooperation anymore. We're in the game where a court has said there is some reason to believe this person has not corroborated or cooperated in all respects.
It is Tuesday, the 10th of April of 2018, and you're in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special, of course, is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. And it's a little bit of nuance, but it's appropriate dish for the kind of day that we are having today. Oh, what a night. What a night. So much news. It happens so fast and furious, as they are wont to say. Now, there are many, many possible reasons on why the raid on Cohen's offices, happened. And one of them might be that documents, evidence, was being destroyed. Which was a similar sort of concern when Manafort's domiciles and offices were raided also. Yeah. And I love how Donald Trump called it a break-in. Some people never change. What's on the menu today? Because there's so much news. I mean, I could talk about Jenny Thomas attacking the Parkland school kids. Well, criticizes them. But, I could talk about that. I could talk about Sean Hannity and Jimmy Kimmel essentially saying, okay, let's stop being dicks. Though I gotta say, Jimmy Kimmel wasn't ever being a dick. But that's how it works these days. I could talk about French President Emmanuel Macron causing an uproar, essentially... I don't know if he's attacking the secular state, which is, France prides itself very much on that. But, he wanted to bring down the wall between church and state. Emmanuel Macron! Yeah, they said they wanted a president, and somehow they got a little priest. I could talk about that. I could talk about the Flint school children going to be screened for the effects of lead after the state said no more bottled water for you. And once again, they don't want to fix the problem before it happens. They always want to fix the problem after. I could talk about that. There's so much to talk about, but we can't. We we will go to the stories that we've curated for you today. So, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, over 300,000 Americans vow to protest in every state when, not if, when Trump fires Mueller. Yep. The Special Counsel is probing a Ukrainian billionaire's 2015 payment to the Trump organization that was solicited by Michael Cohen. And Yulia Skripal, poisoned along with her former Russian agent father, has left a British hospital. Apparently, according to the report, she's recovered enough to leave the hospital. Very interesting. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Trump promised to eliminate the deficit, but it's set to rise to $1 trillion instead. And a Holocaust survivor says Trump's America is just like Berlin of 1929. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link, and Roaring Girl, Kelly Lincoln, monitors that quite diligently throughout the day. To the leftish is a very important part of that homepage, and that is where the Donate Contribute buttons are. Now, I must say that we are in the process of migrating, and hopefully we can migrate all of our contributors to a new Patreon account and a PayPal account. So we'll let you know how that goes. But thank you. Your contributions keep the lights on, and that's very important because at least we on the left, we pay our bills. Because there's a certain leadership in Washington, D.C. in the Oval Office who apparently never does. Oh, my. So join Netroots Radio. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We're on Facebook if you like to do that. And follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And also I put up show notes and links on Daily Kos. And that gets published about 10 minutes before showtime. And, of course, I can be found on Daily Kos as Justice Putnam. Show music for West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is provided by the lovely Frances Livings. And if you're ever in Southern California, she plays quite often. She has some fixed dates all around, and I'll apprise you of those in the coming days. One other bit of information is that when Mueller gets fired, and I got to tell you, I'm in a bubble right now. I put myself in a bubble about, 2 hours before showtime, and there's only so much that I can have come in. So if Mueller's fired already, I apologize. We will be going live when Mueller gets fired, and we have quite a lineup of folks that will be joining us to do that. Driftglass and Blue Gal are some people that will be doing that. Arliss Bunny, Will McLeod, Tom, our Tom from the Coffee Cast. I'll be doing it. Irreverent Testimony, they'll be taking part. Cliff Schechter is part of the panel, and we'll be deconstructing and analyzing the events as they happen. And also we'll be getting information from MoveOn.org because they'll have some actions happening across the country, and we'll get live updates and feeds from them around the country as the events unfold. Isn't that something? Okay. Well, that basically leads into the first story that we have here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. And that's 300,000 Americans vow to protest in every state. Not if, but when Trump fires Mueller. Okay, Trump's admiration for dictators may have led him to think he can get away with behaving like one, but his attacks on Special Counsel Robert Mueller are likely to backfire resoundingly. This is by Allison Parker out of Share Blue Media, by the way. After the FBI executed a raid on the office of Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, he's not a lawyer. He's not even Tom. You're out, Tom. Tom, you're out. We need a war conciliar. You just can't do it. I'm sorry, Tom, you're out. He's not Tom. He's kind of like a cross between Sonny and Luca Brasi. Or maybe he wants to be Luca Brasi. Jeez. He's not a lawyer. Fixer, maybe that's, I don't know. When asked if he planned to fire Mueller, Trump responded cryptically, "We'll see what happens." Trump launched another unhinged rant. He called the raid an attack on our country and a whole new level of unfairness. An attack on our country. Only a Russian agent would say that. Only someone who thinks that Mother Russia is their country would think that the FBI executing a warrant is an attack on the country.
A source close to the White House warned that Mueller's decision could push Trump in the direction of taking action against the special counsel's office. I think only after, maybe a dozen more airfields in Syria will be blown up than what they had planned previous to the announcement that Cohen's offices had been raided. It is a pattern from Trump, even if he's been warned by some in his own party that firing Mueller would be the beginning of the end of his presidency. And in the latest sign of massive resistance to Trump, from the women's marches to the March for Our Lives, thousands of Americans are ready to make that warning a reality. 300,000 people across the country have signed up to protest when Trump makes good on his apparent wish. Protests are planned at more than 800 locations in all 50 states. Republican leaders have stubbornly refused to even accept the idea that Mueller needs to be protected from Trump's recklessness. But Mueller's aggressive new approach and now the raid on Trump's lawyer and hush money man has clearly gotten even further under Trump's skin. His near constant meltdown seemed directly tied to the progress of the investigations. Trump cares little for the norms of the office he occupies, but that doesn't mean the rest of the country has forgotten about them. And hundreds of thousands of citizens are ready to give Trump a very loud reminder should he cross the line from bluster into dangerous action, because, Mr. Trump, welcome to the rule of law. Offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is by Michael S. Schmidt and Maggie Haberman. I apologize, okay? But it's the New York Times, and I just had to. Initially, Raw Story had a couple of paragraphs, but it didn't really do the story justice. No pun intended. The Special Counsel is investigating a payment made to Trump's foundation by a Ukrainian steel magnate for a talk during the campaign, according to 3 people briefed on the matter, as part of a broader examination of streams of foreign money to Mr. Trump and his associates in the years leading up to the election. I should say that the Netroots Radio Style Manual prevents me from referring to Donald Trump by the P word. Now, we can say President Obama. Well, we just cannot give that appellation to one Donald J. Trump, okay? So Maggie and Michael here at the New York Times obviously follow a different kind of style manual. So the Netroots Radio Style Manual, it doesn't allow it, and I ought to know because I wrote it. And sometimes I make it up as I go along. Investigators subpoenaed the Trump Organization this year for an array of records about business with foreign nationals. In response, the company handed over documents about a $150,000 donation that the Ukrainian billionaire Viktor Pinchuk made in September of 2015 to the Donald J. Trump Foundation in exchange for a 20-minute appearance by Mr. Trump that month through a video link to a conference in Kiev. Remember when they were yelling, "Lock her up," because Hillary gave a speech in front of, some stockbrokers? Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer, whose office and hotel room were raided on Monday in an apparent unrelated case, solicited the donation. Apparent unrelated case. Maggie, come on, wake up. The contribution from Mr. Punchik, who has sought closer ties for the Ukraine to the West, was the largest the foundation received in 2015 from anyone besides Mr. Trump himself. The subpoena is among signs in recent months that the Special Counsel is interested in interactions that Mr. Trump or his associates had with countries beyond Russia, though it is not clear what other payments he is scrutinizing. Really? Now, Maggie, you've been with the New York Times for a while. Do you ever get out? Mr. Mueller also ordered the Trump Organization to turn over documents, emails, and other communications about several Russians, including some whose names have not been publicly tied to Mr. Trump. Okay, but the identities of the Russians were unclear. Yeah, because I don't think Mueller really wants them to have a convenient heart attack, a convenient poisoning, a convenient hanging, or my favorite, the convenient fall from a 5-story window, moving a piano from a condo, and you don't own a condo or a piano. The payment from Mr. Punchik is curious because it comes during a campaign and is from a foreigner. And it looks like an effort to buy influence, said Marcus S. Owens, a former head of the IRS. An unusual amount of money for such a short speech. Remember when they said lock her up because Mallory spoke in front of stockbrokers? Mr. Cohen did not respond to a request for comment. Jay Sekulow, a lawyer for the president, did not return several messages. These aren't lawyers. Sekulow is a TV personality who goes on, had a blog where he pushed his NRA, anti-abortion, Christianist, white supremacist drivel. And Cohen's not a lawyer. He's a bag man. And sometimes muscle. Not him personally, but he brings the muscle. Okay. Well, they didn't respond because, why would they? And neither did a lawyer for the Trump Organization itself. When the New York Times revealed the existence of the subpoena in March, Mr. Trump's associates played it down as a routine court order to ensure the Trump Organization had handed over all the documents Mr. Mueller had demanded. Mr. Trump assailed the Special Counsel investigation yesterday as a witch hunt, reaching for a favored insult in response to the seizure of Mr. Cohen's records. He had complained that he had cooperated with the inquiry and viewed the warrant for the raid obtained by federal prosecutors in Manhattan after a referral from Mr. Mueller as an extreme step. Well, maybe it might be that line in the sand. The line that they will not cross, because I have an idea that they probably got some IRS records finally that Trump doesn't want to turn over. Yep, it's an attack on our country. Huh. Who says that? Once again, I think somebody who believes Mother Russia is their country. But I'm a romantic. Trump's foundation attracted scrutiny during the 2016 campaign over revelations about his lack of financial support for it and his use of it to pay legal settlements rather than fulfill pledges he had given to charity. In 2007, Trump used $20,000 from the foundation to buy a 6-foot-tall portrait of himself. Well, look, when you're Ozymandias and you're looking across the long and level sands of eternity, I don't know. The glaring sneer, the upturned lip, the hand that feeds. All right. Well, let's see. Okay, he also used the appearance with his War Department to criticize President Barack Obama amid deteriorating relations between the U.S. and Russia over its incursions in Ukraine. Putin does not respect and never did respect Obama. Oh, of course not. Because anybody who stands up to Putin is on the enemy list. Isn't that true? Okay, in a statement, the Victor Pinchuk Foundation said it reached out to Mr. Trump and other world leaders to help promote, strengthen, and endure our ties between the Ukraine and the West. The foundation said the donation was a specific request to Mr. Trump Foundation in September of 2015, when there were multiple candidates for the Republican nomination for president, and it was by no means assured that Mr. Trump would be the Republican nominee in 2016, because gaming the election was yet to come. Finishing up here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is an article out of Reuters by Michael Holden and Guy Falconbridge. Yulia Skripal has been discharged from hospital more than a month after she was poisoned by a military-grade nerve agent, together with her father, a former Russian spy, the English hospital treating them said today. Yulia and Sergei Skripal, age 66, a former colonel in the Russian military intelligence, who betrayed dozens of spies to Britain's foreign intelligence service, were found unconscious on a public bench in the English city of Salisbury on 4 March. With Britain accusing Russia of being behind the nerve agent attack, the affair has blown up into one of the biggest Russia-West crises since the Cold War. Britain, the United States, and other Western governments have expelled scores of Russian diplomats while Moscow has retaliated in kind. Russia denies any involvement in the attack on the Skripals, just like they have denied the attack on every other person that had a convenient heart attack, convenient polonium poisoning, convenient hanging, or the convenient fall from a 5-story window moving a piano from a condo, but you don't own a piano or a condo. The couple were in critical condition for weeks, and doctors at one point feared, even if they survived, they might have suffered brain damage, but the Skripals' health since then has begun to improve rapidly. Yulia, age 33, has been discharged from Salisbury District Hospital, and her father could be discharged in due course. We have now discharged Yulia, a spokesperson for Salisbury District Hospital said. This is not the end of her treatment, but marks a significant milestone. Her father has also made good progress. On Friday, it was announced he was no longer in critical condition, although he is recovering more slowly than Yulia. We hope that he, too, will be able to leave hospital in due course. Yulia has been taken to a secure location, the BBC said. Russia has denied Britain's charges of involvement in the first known offensive use of such a nerve agent in European soil since World War II, and suggested Britain carried out the attack itself to stoke anti-Russian hysteria. Yeah, it was a false flag, and Britain did it. Vlad, come on. We're way ahead of you on that one. You think you invented that? Okay, so giving the first details about the medical treatment of the Skripals, the doctors had first sought to stabilize them to ensure that they could breathe and that blood could circulate. We then needed to use a variety of different drugs to support the patients until they could create more enzymes to replace those affected by the poisoning. We also used specialized decontamination techniques to remove any residual toxins. She did not say when Yulia had been discharged, but the BBC said she had left hospital last night and is now in a safe place. Let's hope so. All right, let's get to our break. We'll come back, go through weather from around the world at the chef's table, and then finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, a trip to the 40s and the 80s. Fans of Ernest Cline's popular novel, Ready Player One, might be surprised at how different the Steven Spielberg-directed movie is from the novel, even though it's co-written by the book's author. While the plot and the core characters are the same, this adaptation is decidedly different in a way that has all the earmarks of a Spielberg movie. With lots of 80s music but set in 2045, Ready Player One tells the story of Wade Watts, a poor teen growing up in the so-called stacks, trailer homes stacked on top of each other, and who, along with most of the world, now finds virtual reality preferable to reality. This virtual world, called Oasis, is the brainchild of an enigmatic programmer named James Halliday, who has bequeathed $500 billion in control of the virtual world to the first person to unlock 3 digital Easter eggs that he hid in the Oasis. Along with everyone else eager to win the prize, there's also an evil corporation called IOI in the hunt. The head of this company, played superbly by Ben Mendelsohn, will stop at nothing to win, and Wade and his virtual friends find themselves in increasing danger the closer they come to unlocking the secret eggs. Of course, since this is a Spielberg movie, many of the darker elements of the book are left out, including the death of a child player killed by IOI. While Ty Sheridan is okay as Wade, it's really the supporting cast that carries the day, including the aforementioned Mendelsohn, the sadly underused Lena Waithe, and Mark Rylance as Halliday. Indeed, Rylance comes across as a sort of Steve Jobs / Willy Wonka figure. Even though only appearing as an avatar, he is arguably the best part of the film, which isn't bad, but falls far short of the book. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. In his farewell address, George Washington warned against the dangers of party and faction. He believed in the virtues of nonpartisan government, in which patriotic citizens of different views would be willing to serve together. George Washington's great stature as a national hero and his willingness to serve for 2 terms bridged strong regional differences and gave the new government time to take root before party factions could become divisive. At the same time, however, Washington's belief in a strong executive and his nationalist sentiments inclined him to favor Alexander Hamilton's policies over Thomas Jefferson's. Washington's warnings against party and faction to the contrary, he was in many respects the country's first Federalist president. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
The Trump administration Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross has glued onto the 2020 census form a question about citizenship. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Adding that question, as the Trump administration knows, will undermine the validity of the census by suppressing participation by immigrants, which is, after all, the whole point of adding that question at the last minute. Many citizens, non-citizens, lawful permanent residents, and undocumented persons will, of course, not participate in the census because they fear or believe rightly, given the Trump administration antipathy towards immigrants, that answering the census might jeopardize themselves or their families. This is Trumpian voter suppression again. The political effect will be to reduce congressional seats in Democratic-leaning states like California and increase Republican representation in the Congress. All this giving us a front row seat to a raw, politically motivated assault on our Constitution, again, this time Section 2 of Article 1, which requires a nationwide census called an enumeration, which means count everyone every 10 years. Fortunately, 12 states are suing the Trump administration over the addition of the citizenship question to the census. In court, hopefully the states, the people, and the values of honesty and integrity and an accurate census will win. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, April 9th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. Last Saturday, April 7th, was World Health Day. Unions around the world took advantage of the day to hold rallies in support of public health care, organized workshops on how to implement decent health care, and other activities. Public Services International, the global union for public sector workers, released a video about health care. It starred the PSI's Health and Social Sector Officer, Baba Aye.
When healthcare is public, your money is invested in making health services better, not paying dividends to wealthy shareholders. Fairer, every year more than 150 million people face economic catastrophe because of health bills. Many private insurance schemes refuse coverage for certain procedures for people with pre-existing conditions. But public healthcare is the only way to ensure health for all. Plus, it reduces inequality and everyone gets access, not just the rich. Stronger public health care makes our whole society stronger, both socially and economically. Investing $1 in community-based public health systems can lead to a return on investment of over $5. And the public health system can address the social determinants of health through measures like anti-smoking initiatives or family planning services. These interventions lead to economic and social benefit for everyone. Health is a fundamental right that is under pressure. The major threat is the myth that private is better. It may not sound scary, but for me, it all comes down to which society we want to build and what future we want to give our children. Our health is not for sale. Health for all now.
The International Labour Organization has embarked on a new campaign to promote maternity care benefits for workers. The ILO is the UN specialized agency focused on matters of work in the world. It produces international laws and recommendations for improving working conditions.
What is maternity protection? 1. Health protection at the workplace. Pregnant women should perform work in an environment that is safe for their health and the health of the child. They should not be exposed to working conditions or substances at the workplace that might pose risks during maternity. 2. Paid maternity leave. Maternity leave should not be less than 14 weeks, including a 6 weeks compulsory leave after childbirth to guarantee the mother's and the baby's health and well-being. The loss of income resulting from maternity leave should be compensated through cash benefits. The cash benefit should be at least equal to 2/3 of previous earnings and can be extended to 100%. The paid maternity leave should be financed through compulsory social insurance or public funds, not by the employer alone. Payment by the employer alone increases female labor costs, which in turn generates discrimination practices against women at work. At a low cost, paid maternity leave ensures that the woman can maintain herself and the child in proper conditions of health and with a suitable standard of living, benefiting the society as a whole. 3. Medical benefits. Timely access to quality healthcare, including prenatal, childbirth, and postnatal medical care, are essential to guarantee healthy lives and maintain productivity at work. 4. Protection of employment and non-discrimination. In order to safeguard the employment of pregnant workers and to combat all forms of discrimination against women on the ground of maternity, women have the right to return to the same job or an equivalent one with the same pay after their leaves, and national laws must forbid dismissal on the ground of maternity and its consequences. 5. Breastfeeding arrangements at work. Breastfeeding women should have the right to one or more paid daily breaks or paid reduction in working time for the purpose of breastfeeding. Maternity protection at work is a right for all women, in both formal and informal economy, and a benefit to the entire society. By protecting health and safety of the mother and the child, and guaranteeing gender equality, maternity protection contributes to improve child nutrition and early child development, and to build a healthy and productive workforce, which contribute to economic growth and development of the nation.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From the United Nations, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Russia warned Tuesday of an imminent response to the expulsion of more than 130 of its diplomats by 24 countries this week. Those countries blame Russia for the attempted assassination of a former Russian spy in the UK last month. Australia is the latest country to kick out Russian officials alleged to be undercover intelligence operatives. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop took things a step further and said punishments could trickle into the realm of sports.
The World Cup is one of the further actions that could be taken in relation to this matter.
Bishop later clarified she meant a state boycott of the Russian World Cup this summer, meaning government officials wouldn't attend as VIPs. If that happens, Australia will join 6 other countries in banning their diplomats from the competition. As for Russia's retaliation, Moscow is likely to order the expulsion of foreign diplomats as well. On Monday, Russia's embassy in Washington even took to Twitter to solicit advice about which American consulate in the country to close. The winner, out of more than 55,000 votes, was the American diplomatic facility in St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city. And while independence seems a faraway dream for those in the Spanish province of Catalonia, that isn't stopping demonstrators from voicing their frustration with the Spanish government as a top independence campaigner languishes in a German jail. Crowds of Catalans took to the street on Tuesday to snarl traffic and draw attention to the plight of Carles Puigdemont, the region's former president who organized an independence vote in October before fleeing the country. Puigdemont was charged with rebellion by Spanish authorities last week and subsequently detained in Germany as courts consider a request for his extradition. In a referendum last year, Catalans overwhelmingly opted for independence on low turnout. Spain's government called the referendum illegal and has since stripped away self-governance powers from Catalonia. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. That's right. Not just in the gourmet section. Oh, no. It might be in the international supermarket late at night, too. Okay, so let's start with weather from around the world, and we always begin along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees, and we're going to be a bit cooler than we were yesterday. We were slated to go to almost 80, and we went to about 77. Oh my God. It was pretty. It was sunny. I got some work done, and which was good because then we had a precipitous drop in temperature, and we will only be in the upper 60. The low 60s, upper 50s to low 60s. And when I say precipitous, I mean that there's some precipitation coming down. We're going to get a 1/4 of an inch today till about this time tomorrow, and then add on about another 1/4 inch to that. And then what will that make it? Okay, then we're supposed to not have any rain on Friday, and then a bunch of rain for 4 or 5 days. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Our landscape can handle it, and it does. Okay, so air quality is good at 34 parts per million, which is a little high for my ailing mom. Oh, I should mention she's getting a little bit better. She'd been under the weather from bronchitis and a few other things. And we have a really good doctor. She says he's young. He's like about 45. But He's convinced her that maybe some of the pharmaceuticals that she's on, especially the powerful ones that mess up your brain, maybe that's not good for her. And so that's good. We're getting a more conscious and intent in our lives now, aren't we? No, but she's doing much better, and it's good because spring is upon us, and we got color to put in the garden, and I need my mother's eye. Yes. Okay. So air quality index is good at 34, not so good for her. Pressure is falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is actually, they have it listed at 10 miles. I just looked out, and I think it's more like about 3. But, oh well. Humidity is 60%, but since it's raining pretty hard, I think that's a little bit more than 60% where I'm at. All right. Well, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. London is 57 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 61 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 64 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 72 degrees and fair. Kabul is 55 with thunderstorms, which really wreaks havoc on drones. So have a wedding party in the thunderstorm. That's the only way to be safe. Come on. Let's see. Oh, Hong Kong is 69 and clear. Tokyo is 56 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 69 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Right, first offering here at the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article out of Think Progress by Ryan Koronowski. Trump did promise to eliminate the deficit, and instead it's set to rise to $1 trillion, but his base doesn't care as long as they can kick black and brown people. Of course, he does have his beloved tax cut to thank for this, not being able to get rid of the deficit. It's getting tired of all this winning. The deficit, you, me, everybody. According to a report released yesterday afternoon from the CBO, the annual U.S. budget deficit will rise above $1 trillion in 2020, 2 years earlier than previously forecast. Last year, the CBO estimated the 2018 deficit would be $242 billion less than this year's estimate. Why? The main reason is smaller tax revenues. The report explained that accounting for most of that difference is a $194 billion reduction in projected revenues, mainly because the 2017 Tax Act is expected to reduce collections of individual and corporate income taxes. Well, if you're deconstructing the administrative state, this seems like a feature, not a bug. Okay. So, shortly before his inauguration, Trump told Sean Hannity that he would balance a budget very quickly, I think over a 5-year period. And I don't know, maybe I could even surprise you. Yeah, we're surprised. Actually, none of us are quite surprised. Everybody warned you. Well, not everybody. Let's put it this way. Black women warned you, and no one listened. Just like they never listened before. And we've suffered the consequences every single time. Cumulatively, the 2018-27 period, the deficit will be $11.7 trillion, about a $1.5 trillion larger than the agency anticipated in June, the CBO report said. Most of that deficit can be explained by the lost revenue caused by the tax cut that Congress passed and Trump signed at the end of last year at the same time. The 2018 budget passed earlier this year increases military and domestic spending by about $300 billion. The federal government operated with a surplus in the 90s, then ran a medium deficit in the aughts until the Great Recession required stimulus spending along with bank bailouts to rescue the economy by that socialist black guy from Kenya. He made it so we can't steal money from old people and still get our commission. Socialist Kenyan. Those trillion-dollar-plus deficits shrank back to average size in recent years, but it looks like increased spending and large tax cuts is what will cause deficits to balloon out again. The White House's own budget proposal would run a $900 billion annual budget deficit into 2022, but that didn't stop White House spokesperson Raj Shah from claiming erroneously on Fox News, that's Trump TV, that the Trump budget has over $3 trillion in deficit reduction, which is the largest deficit reduction of a budget in terms of a 10-year outlay that we've ever seen. Okay. They love to lie, don't they?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Okay, finishing up here at the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article by Shane Croucher out of Newsweek. This is quite a long and comprehensive narrative. We won't be able to get through all of it, but do go to the show note links. It's quite harrowing and very illuminating as well. Stephen B. Jacobs has a warning from the past for America today. It's happening again. At 79 years old, he is among the youngest of the Holocaust survivors still alive, but Jacobs can remember life in the Nazi concentration camp at Buchenwald, what the Nazis did to him, his family, his friends. He worries about what's happening right now in America, where he has lived and prospered since arriving a couple of years after Buchenwald's liberation on the 11th of April of 1945. The American far right appears emboldened since the election of Donald Trump, who led in an inflammatory nationalist campaign. Since then, clashes like the one in Charlottesville are becoming almost commonplace. Things just go from bad to worse every day. Jacobs, a successful New York architect who designed the Holocaust Memorial at Buchenwald, said, "There's a real problem growing." So much so that Jacob thinks there is a direct parallel with Germany between the two world wars. Perhaps more alarming than the far right getting braver is the seep into mainstream politics of their hate, their talking points, their rhetoric. It feels like 1929 or 1930 Berlin, Jacobs says. And things couldn't be said 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, could not be said in public. Those are now normal discourse. It is totally unacceptable. We thought our country had changed. In fact, it did not. We are operating on a misconception. My God, we elected a black president to the United States. Look how far we've come. We have not, Jacobs warned. In Trump, Jacobs said, the far right sees an enabler. I'm involved in New York real estate. I know this man personally, says Jacobs, whose architecture firm celebrated his 50th birthday on 2017, or celebrated its 50th birthday in 2017. Trump is an enabler. Trump has no ideas. Trump is out for himself. He's a sick, very disturbed individual. I couldn't say that Trump is a fascist because you've got to know what fascism is. And I don't think he has the mental power to even understand it. Jacobs calls New York, where he lives, an island of resistance, but he says Washington will soon realize, too, that fascism has to be resisted. Fascism could have won in Spain. It could have been stopped, but appeasement of fascism is what led to everything, Jacobs warns. This is a man who lived what happens when fascism is not stopped before it metastasizes. He was born in Lodz, Poland in 1939. His father, a physician, moved the family to Piotrkow near Warsaw shortly after the Nazi invasion of Poland in September of that year. Piotrkow, where many Jewish refugees in Poland fled, would become the Nazis' first ghetto. Liquidated in 1942, a labor camp was established with 2 factories, where the family lived until their brutal separation in 1944. The women, his mother, 3 aunts, and grandmother, were taken to a camp at Ravensbrück. The men, he, his older brother, and his father, to Buchenwald. In my case, you didn't eat in Buchenwald unless you worked, so I was given an identity card that said I was 16 years old, Jacob said. I was 5, because he wanted to eat. He lived in a shoe factory, which also got him out of roll call every day. Working made you useful to the Nazis. Those not able to work, including young children like Jacobs, were sent to their deaths. He was told to keep his hat low and bang on a shoe if a Nazi ever entered the workshop, and if asked his age, to lie. Before liberation, as the Allies closed in, the situation got especially dangerous because the Nazis rushed to liquidate the camp. One memory haunted Jacobs. His father, trying to keep him safe, entrusted him and another young boy in his care to a Gentile in the group. That guy got scared and he abandoned us, Jacob said. He put us in a barrack that had already been emptied. In other words, the people had already been deported. And we spent that night in this barrack, and I will never forget that. I had nightmares about that for many, many years growing up. Somehow in the morning, my father found us. I don't know how he made the connection. And he took us and hid us in the TB ward in the hospital. Jacob's father was an orderly at the camp hospital. Nazis and German doctors didn't enter the tuberculosis ward, fearing infection, which made it a good, if risky, hiding place. For years, he wondered how his father managed to keep both he and his brother George alive. Then he realized his father had help. Help from the camp's active underground resistance. Buchenwald was founded before the war in 1937 to intern political prisoners such as communists. Inevitably, the communist prisoners got organized. In other words, they were a resistance. They protected each other, hid children from the camp, counterfeited paperwork. Some held administrative posts. They ran the day-to-day. So that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But do finish this article. It's quite stunning. And we need to remember, and we need to resist, and we need to not let it get normalized. We must not. All right, we'll visit up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But stay tuned to Netroots Radio. We may be going live at any moment when Mueller is fired, and as this news just percolates and gets even more pronounced. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.